Hello, welcome back to the channel. So out of all the paths in Starro, Harmony has probably just been like consistently the most broken one in the entire game. I mean, whenever a new Harmony character is revealed, everyone's first reaction is like, yeah, they're probably gonna be broken. Or like at the very least really good. I'm kind of wondering like why. What makes Harmony like so strong compared to a lot of the other paths in the game? And I think that there are a couple of reasons. One is that like it's like one of the only paths in the game that can give action advance forward to its allies. Like, yes, Remembrance MC does also do that, but Remembrance MC is also basically a Harmony character, so it still does kind of count. An action advance forward is like one of the most valuable things you can have on a lot of teams, since it allows your DPS to take a lot more turns and do a lot more damage. It's also just good for getting characters to be able to get a lot more energy, and also some characters can give it to the entire team, which is really good. And even besides just that, a lot of the buffs that they give are just really strong. Like Tribute giving a 24% all-type res pen for basically free is insane. Even some of like the weaker ones like Yukong or Asta, I would say are still better than a lot of other characters, because just having a support on your team is always good, even if they aren't as good as a lot of the limited characters, and that gap is pretty big. Which I think is another main reason why Harmony is so strong, is that they've just been like some of the most like consistently good characters in the game. Like they have way more like longevity and like resistance to power creep than a lot of other characters do. Like basically every one of them since like Ron May has been like consistently good. You know, like I said, Ron May is really good, even like outside of some break teams. Robin is really good on a lot of teams. Even someone like Sparkle, who like does kind of get memed on a bit from kind of falling off a bit, is still like really good. Like her actual numbers and everything are really good. She's just a bit more like specialized and doesn't really have a place in a lot of teams right now. So it's not like she's bad. She doesn't really have a place. But even then, like just having a Harmony character on your team is always good, because they are kind of what really make your DPS do a lot bigger damage than they would otherwise. Because like you can have the best DPS in the game, and that will definitely help you a lot, but having like no real supports for them is also going to hurt a lot and make them do a lot less damage than they could otherwise, which I do think is both a good and bad thing, since it means that they're pretty safe options to pull for, since you know that they will always be at least helpful to you in some way. But on the other hand, I think that they're almost like too good, where like some teams do feel way worse if you don't have the specific Harmony character. Like Agalaya feels a lot worse without Sunday, or like Follow Up without Robin does feel pretty mediocre. Like I don't really like that kind of thing where like it's either you have this character or this thing just feels kind of unplayable. Like I don't really like that kind of design. But anyway, besides the slight problems that I have with it, another thing that makes Harmony so good is that unlike a lot of like DPS paths or even like sustain paths, Harmony doesn't really have to compete with like any other path. The closest is maybe like Nihility, but even then Nihility does kind of fulfill different roles to what Harmony would do, and most of the time, unless you're like doing like a debuff focused team, like with like Acheron or something, you would much rather use a Harmony character on most teams, since giving your own characters buffs is generally a lot better than debuffing the enemy, unless like the debuff number is just insanely high. Now, I don't think this is always the case. Sometimes you would run like both. Like I do think Cypher is a bit more diverse in what team she can be in, and even like the buffed Silver Wolf seems like she's going to have a bit more diversity and what team she can be in besides just Acheron. So I think we'll have to see in the future how much more diverse Nihility ends up being, because at least right now, most Nihility characters mainly just want to be with other Nihility characters, you know? Well, for the most part, you know, someone like Tribby or Ron May or Robin are better in like most teams, since a lot of the supports now I think are like, they're both specialized but also like general at the same time. That's what I mean, is that like they're really good in a specific team, but can also be pretty good out in other teams. You know, someone like Sunday, for example, is really good with characters that can summon, because his damage buff is amplified if the character has a summon, or characters that also need a lot of energy. But it's not like he's bad outside of that, because one, most characters need energy, but just giving a like free 30% damage increase, as well as also, you know, buffing crit damage and crit rate basically for free, is really good. Or someone like Ron May, who like is mainly built for break, but can also be good outside of that in things like, you know, like dot teams, or even someone like Casters, who kind of just wants a more general support. But even just besides the actual characters, another good thing about Harmony is the light cone options that they have, because most of them, I would say, are pretty good. You know, something like Good Memories of the Past is pretty decent on some characters. past and future can also be pretty good on certain characters. But like the main one for them is Dance Dance Dance, which is probably like one of the best light cones in the game, just because action, like I said before, action advance forward is really good. But even then, you do have things like Battle Isn't Over, which you can get from the shop, which is also pretty great. So like, it does feel like Harmony has more good options than it does bad options, which isn't necessarily the case for some other paths. Do they have like mediocre ones? I mean, yeah, definitely. Something like Dreamville Adventure is pretty hard to use because you kind of have to like set up things weirdly. The same thing with like Carve the Moon, since you're basically just relying on RNG for your buffs, which isn't necessarily a good strategy. But most of them I would say are good for, you know, certain characters, which I do think makes them a lot easier to build than some other paths might feel. Like I said before, I do think some of them might be a bit too good because like the difference between like the 5-star Harmony characters and the 4-star ones is pretty massive. While I do think that the 4-star ones are good, someone like, you know, Tribby, he's just on a whole other level of like broken, you know? And I do think the game is kind of going in a direction of like kind of being balanced around needing these supports to beat a lot of the content, which I don't necessarily mind characters being good. I've said in many videos that I don't have a problem with the newer characters being strong. I think the main problem is when it feels like there's no real alternative option besides those characters. Like, for example, me personally, I've tried to get every limited Harmony character that has come out, and the only one that I haven't lost to was Ronmei, so Ronmei is the only one that I have. Now, maybe that's just me having bad luck, but like, I don't think characters should be so core to a team that if you don't have them, you probably just aren't going to be able to beat the full amount of content, which I just don't really think is good design. Now, I do also think that this is partially just because of the lack of really good 4-star options, which I do hope that they buff a lot of them, since a lot of them are really close to being good, but just fall short. Like someone like Yukong, giving an 80% attack buff is really good. She's just so hard to use because of how her buff works. But at the end of the day, the main thing that I think really makes Harmony so good is just the fact that they're almost always just a safe pick to pull. And just because of like how versatile they are, you could just put them in almost any team. I wouldn't be surprised if Storager is also really broken, which it's kind of insane that we're getting Tribby, Sunday, and Sparkle reruns in 3.4, and then in 3.5, we're getting another Harmony character on top of that. I do think that Harmony is kind of starting to get a bit oversaturated. Like, there's so many of them now, and they're all really good. So after Storager, I do kind of hope that we don't get more Harmony characters for a while, because having so many of them feel like must-pulls does get kind of tiring. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.